background. The topic for the session for today is need for speed, broadband challenges, issues, and trends. First, let me to introduce key participants for this session. We have Ucha Seturi on the right. He is coming from the Small and Medium Telecom Operators Association from Georgia. Next to him we have Primoz Ursic. He is coming from the Agency for Communication Networks and Services of the Republic of Slovenia. So he is coming from the National Regulatory Authority from Slovenia. Next to him we have Bogdan Manolea, Association for Technology and Internet, Romania. And on your left side is Vladimir Ristevski. He is coming from VIP operator from Macedonia. As I already said, the discussion for this session will go around broadband access, or to be more specific, will be about the deployment of broadband networks capable of providing high-speed broadband access with speed with broadband speed of 30 megabits and more. You know, nowadays investment in broadband networks is very important, not just for the economical growth, but also for the need of the bandwidth demanding services. We'll see from the user perspective what is important for the take-up of these services to be higher. Later on we'll observe about the initiative at the European level, initiative from the European EU Commission, in order how to reduce the cost for deployment of next generation access networks. And without the commercial interest, it seems that there is no interest for investment from the operators in the rural area. So with this low level of interest, it seems that the gap between urban and rural is going bigger and bigger. You know, also there was in September last year there was a proposal for telecom package review. We'll see what the impact this proposal in its draft version has on the deployment of these networks. So let's start first with the digital agenda. You know, digital agenda of Europe was adopted in 2010. It's about how to use ICT technology in order to have more innovation, to have more progress and bigger economic growth. You know that the digital economy is growing at the rate of 12% each year at the EU level, and it is growing at the rate which is seven times higher than the rate of the rest of the economy. So that's why it is very important how to take the advantage of these ICT technologies. This digital agenda has 7 pillars. I know that we don't have enough time to go through all of them, but one of the main pillars is about the investment, about the deployment of next generation access networks. So being a digital agenda as the one of the flagship initiative from the European Union and its proposal towards European 2020 strategy, they have some targets for broadband deployment, and it is up to the 2020 to have 30 megabits per second for all households in European Union. So it is about the coverage. So that means that each household has to have the opportunity to connect to internet with the speed of 30 megabits, at least 30 megabits. And the second target is about the subscription. So until 2020, 50% of the subscription should be, of the total broadband subscription should be via the network capable of providing 100 megabits per second. So before I jump to the first question, I almost forget. For those who are following us online, online web streaming, I just want to encourage them that they have the option to participate remotely. On the cdic.net website, all of you who are following us remotely via internet have the option to join the meeting and to give us your contribution. So let's get back to these targets. According to scoreboard, which is available on the EU Commission website, EU Commission is measuring what have been achieved at the EU level against these targets. So the data that's available on this website says that 76% of the European homes can have access to speed, can have access to internet with the broadband speed of at least 30 megabits per second. So the first target, which was 100% of the households, until 2016, the level which is reached at the at the EU level is 76%. But on the other side, about the access to internet network with the speed with 100 megabits per second and more, Europe is lagging behind against those targets which they have set by themselves. So Slovenia is, I would say, one of the leading countries among the other EU countries with the coverage of almost 80%, according to the data that I have found on the internet. So they have about 80% of the coverage with the networks capable of providing 30 megabits per second and more. But on the other side, it seems that the take-up is at the EU level, about 10% of the deployed network is already utilized by the active subscription. So I have a question for Primož Ursic. Can you say what are the obstacles, according to your opinion, in order to reach these targets? And can you share your experience how it is possible for Slovenia to have such a high level of broadband network coverage with 80% providing speed of 30 megabits per second and more?
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. I will start with the good part, and that would be the good numbers, so 80 plus. I would say the key word in this case for Slovenia would be infrastructure competition. We have quite strong legacy network. Copper can take up to 80% out of this. We also have quite strong in cable coverage, which is 45%. And fiber optics is coming afterwards with around 40, if I'm not mistaken. So we have noticed a couple of interesting things going in Slovene investment part. Maybe I should go from start, though. I would just like to add, I'm the head of division for infrastructure monitoring department in Slovenia, so my part will be a little more on the investment and infrastructure, so I hope it won't be too boring. So one of the things that we noticed was some sort of an investment rush that was going on. So when we saw that alternative operators started to build fiber networks in cities, the incumbent came afterwards and started to build in the same cities his own network. So we came to the situation where we had the cities all of a sudden had multiple infrastructures based. We even have a situation in capital, in Ljubljana, for example. In some parts we have 7 different infrastructures built. Of course, if we go now to the uptake, you will have only 1 subscriber on those. So that's already part of the question answered. Bigger problem concerning uptake, or probably one of the things we will discuss today is why so low when you have an infrastructure built. And from our research that was done within the agency, we discovered that basically the speed is not at the top priority for the average consumer. The average consumer is mostly interested in price. So price is the key factor to this one, and second one is quality. Only around 10% of the people, if I'm not mistaken, pointed out that speed is the most important factor to their decision, or putting differently, around 80% of people decided or replied that they would not pay higher price for higher speed. So if they say we don't need higher, then we probably have to pose different questions in this case. And in fact, we have a situation where we have, I believe, around 50% of subscribers that are hanging in this time around between 10 and 30 megabit per second, which means they are quite well equipped. They are following, let's say, triple play as a typical thing today, but they don't see the need to go 1 step further. So this is probably the question that should be posed on the side of the operators in one case. How to make their investment make profit. We have heard today, I believe from Nicola, why would we invest, or one of your friends. Like, I would say that the question is a little different there. And maybe, if I may, in this case, if we go down back to South Europe in a way, I think we are experiencing the same problems here. We all know that we have quite a vivid geography. We have a lot of mountains, a lot of rural population, which is typical for the whole region. For example, we have, I believe, around 3/4 of all the settlements are rural, so that makes it less than 100 people per square kilometer. And well, simply, I think the ball is in this an operator's side to say, how will I get my investment once it's done to make profit? And if I may touch you a little bit more, even though I'm a little afraid, because of the magic word that came up today, it seems that the OTT at this point is the largest, finds the largest need for higher speeds. So this is probably one of the topics to move on. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. We have also second and more. In Romania, almost 35% together with Sweden of the subscriptions has the option to have internet connection with a speed of 100 megabits per second and more. Bogdan, so I would like to ask you, if possible, just to share your opinion about this phenomena in your country.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. You know, there is this a wonderful book which is called Lying with Statistics. And I recommend you to read it from time to time, because if you read just the statistic and you don't read the footnotes, sometimes you get missed in detail. So that ranking that you said, it might be true for a few bigger cities in Romania, so like Bucharest or others, but it might be totally wrong if you're talking about the rural areas. And we need to have this comparison in mind when we talk about the host country situation. So what it is true is that generally in urban areas, the fast broadband subscription are very good. So according to the DESI report from EU, 70% of subscriptions to fast broadband, so over 30 megabytes per second of the total subscriptions are for fast broadband. So how did we get in this situation? I would say it's a similar answer to the one that we heard from Slovenia. That is a competition, sometimes even a cruel competition on the market. And I think it started with the years 2000, when a very flexible regulatory regime allowed anyone to create their own networks, which we called the network neighborhoods in the country. So at one moment, about 2003, 2004, there were more than 1,000 ISPs notified to the telecom authority. Now, of course, in the meantime, things have changed. A lot of the big operators have acquired the small operators. So now everything is in the hands of, let's say, 95% it's in the hand of 4 or 5 operators, but still the infrastructure remained, and to upgrade that infrastructure was not so difficult. However, what we also need to discuss, I think, is not only what the EU is showing us, so the targets, we need to get to that target. I think we also need to ask ourselves if that target is reasonable, and if that target is useful for us as a society. Because you need to ask yourself, what kind of internet connection does a regular user needs at his household? Does he need a 30 megabytes, 100 megabytes, or 1 gigamegabytes? What would he actually do with it? In a few years ago, when they were talking about 3G, a person said that 3G stands for games, girls, and gambling. And I'm not sure how the 4G or the 5G would look in this direction. But speaking from my personal perspective, the only thing that consumes a lot of bandwidth, including on the 4G, is actually video content. So that is something that you really see the difference. Or if you're playing online games with a high latency and so on and so forth. But is that the regular user that we're aiming at? Well, if we're looking at the general aspect of the population, in the case of Romania, 45% of the population is rural areas, is not the case. So I think that beyond what the EU puts, and it's not the EU, it's actually some politicians within the EU that sets as as targets, we also need to think more realistically in what we need for our citizens and what is the actual need at the citizen base level in terms of access to it, price, of course, and speed. And if we get the three together, I think we can get an correct answer. So yes, the situation right now is good, both in terms of prices and of penetration and subscriptions, but not in the rural areas, where it's a totally different discussions. And just to finish this, so as our colleague from Slovenia mentioned, also in the rural areas, if you talk and speak with people, is not a problem of price necessarily, but it's mostly a problem of what do I do with it? Why would I use the internet? Do I have the knowledge to use the internet? And so on and so forth.
Yes, thank you. We are quite aware that that the gap between urban and rural is growing bigger and bigger, and we'll have a discussion about this later on. And also, probably we have a similar market structure like Bulgarian market. You mentioned that more than 1,000 operators are operating in your country. In today's presentation, before in the morning, I've seen that in Bulgaria there were about 700, 800 operators, and basically they are operators providing local area network, LAN networks, the same computer networks which we are used to in our everyday lives in our company at work. And probably that is the reason why, because this technology by its nature is capable of providing 100 megabits per second and more, and probably that is the reason for such high measurements which are available even on the EU reports or on the other websites. You have mentioned that it's always about the need for the end customer to about the price, about the need, about the quality, whether they need such a speed or 10 megabits would be enough. But I would say about the other e-commerce services like online online purchasing of goods and other stuff. It's very important not for high-speed broadband take-up, but also for the regular broadband take-up, because at the EU level, about 66% of the citizens are buying goods online, and also about the online banking, about 60% of the EU customers are using online banking. There is something very important about this, and it is about the trust and the privacy and the security of the network. So I would say how much important are those factors for to have a bigger take-up, privacy, security, trust of the networks? Because I'm asking you because you are coming from the civil society, I think it's very important for the end customers to have trust in the network, to have a network which is reliable, resilient enough.
Yeah. So first to mention a bit about the correlation between e-commerce. I've been last week at an e-commerce conference, so I was talking in another capacity. But I don't think there is a correlation between the two. So I don't think there is a correlation between the broadband coverage and the broadband access and the increase of e-commerce market. There are the payment system, it's the trust in e-commerce stores and not in the ISPs, which is a totally different story. It's the ability to pay with your credit cards or with other payments that are very easy to use for a regular customer. And also, I think that has nothing to do with the internet, but it's important for e-commerce. It's actually the postal services and how fast and in good shape does the good is being delivered. This being said, what happened in Romania, maybe that's interesting also from a broadband point of view and a mobile broadband point of view, is because of the good mobile broadband penetration, actually nowadays about 50% of the users of a typical web page see your web page from a mobile. So there is a huge push for your website to be mobile friendly. And also in terms of e-commerce stores, I think nowadays so for the biggest e-commerce store, about 25 of the online purchases are made from the mobile, which makes more complicated in order to think if you do an app or whatever. But they also make a public report about that, a public annual report. So I think that's part of the process that encourages the user to use more the infrastructure.
Okay, we have here also Vladimir Ristevsky. I would like to ask him what is so important when it comes about the investment. We are always talking about the regulatory incentives, over-regulations. What is your opinion? What should be done from the policymakers in order to boost the investment for the next generation access networks, in order to, if not possible, to reach those targets, to be as close as possible to these targets until 2020?
Thank you, Sinisha. Thank you very much. And I would like to thank the Agency for Electronic Communication in Macedonia for inviting me and to have a chance to participate in this discussion. I will add something to your question, not just incentives, regulatory incentives, but all regulatory environment. A regulatory environment have very huge influence on investments, of course, from operator side. In that manner, I will not say only that regulatory authority as such can create that environment, but all governmental institutions, local municipalities, even other institutions have possibility to influence regulatory environment.
That's why I said policymakers. I mean by all stakeholders in the market, what would be their role?
To be honest, in the past years, at least here in Macedonia, we have experienced that at least regulatory authority have done a lot of things regarding this. For example, implementation of regulation of decreasing of cost of new high-speed networks, creation of single point of information, and other regulatory measures were taken, like wholesale open of the access to the network of incumbent or even our network. So I would say that if you say one side is maybe doing something, but I think that we are lacking bigger approach from other institutions. For example, if you take, if you have idea to invest, and you can, you must have, if you're investing, you will say, okay, I will build up a network, I will lay the cables, I will connect all consumers to my network, and then you have a lot of issues like owner rights of the property, you have a lot of issues regarding the licenses for building the network. I think that that kind of environment can be more friendly towards the operators in order to have possibility in the end, on the other side, to lower the cost of the building of the networks. Of course, we are talking on the supply side. We cannot forget demand side, because if you are discussing only the supply side, yes, regulatory authority, a lot of other institutions can do a lot of things, set the minimum parameters for quality of the service or other things. But on the other side, also I think that the responsibility of the governmental institution is to maintain or create demand from the consumers. For example, if you can create environment when I don't know, digital system for workflow for companies, for even for consumers, even for citizens, they can apply for some license electronically, or they can use freely digital signature. If you create that kind of environment, it can boost demand side from the consumers, which lowers, of course, which increase the monetization of the investments and decrease the cost. So there are a lot of things that can be done, but we are just hoping that soon we'll see a lot of progress in this.
That there will be more initiative about this. And before I ask the audience if they have any question, I would like just to get back to Bogdan with one more question, because he mentioned about the price, the quality. I think it has something to do with the competition, and I would like to ask you, what is your opinion? How much competition is important in order to get better innovation, better quality of the service, better price of the service? And also one very important topic, I would like to ask you, what is your opinion, also coming from the civil society, what is your opinion about net neutrality? Because it seems like that the net neutrality that we are talking a lot about these days is very important, not just for the end customers, but also for the service providers, just to have the traffic flow to be treated equally from the operators, just to provide better services to the end subscribers.
Thank you. So on the first part, I think competition is crucial, and not only competition between the players in the same market, but also on markets that can compete one another. What we saw in our case was that the take-up of the 4G in certain big cities made some consumers give up on some of the subscription that they have on a fixed telephone or fixed broadband, because that was no longer interested. So I think that the regulator needs, and I'm pretty sure that they do, they need to take this into account whenever they assess the market for competition reasons. I would also mention one point that I think it's important, also the quality of the service. So it's not just, you know, to offer the 30 megabytes per second, but it's important to know if this is the maximum speed, the average speed, or the minimum speed, because these three in practice will deliver you a different service, and the user needs to know that in a way which is very clear for him. Other things that were done in Romania, I think it helped to increase the trust and actually how to compare the operators is to oblige the operators to publish information about the number of cases when they need to intervene and how long it will take to intervene to fix up the network. So that's also something important. As regards net neutrality, I think nowadays, at least in the European Union, when we have a clear regulation and we have also the BEREC guidelines on net neutrality, things should be more clearer. It remains to be seen how this will be implemented, but in our point of view, net neutrality is a key aspect for any kind of network that provides access to the internet to the users, because otherwise it's not just a matter of consumer issues, but it's also a thing that affects us all as citizens, as citizens interested in our human rights, as our freedom of expression can be affected by that, or it can stifle innovation. So, and actually it shows in our case in the Romanian market that the fact that the market was so open, it was full of internet service provider, the other collateral markets, for example, the e-commerce or the online providers, were developed independently and openly without the fear that one ISPs might promote them or not. This wasn't the case for the social networks, where actually one specific social network that is everywhere nowadays was heavily promoted by one of the operators, so now it's basically the only one on the market. And that raises another question regarding the markets that come one over another. So for example, how does an ISP might influence other markets that are on the online services?
Thank you. I asked this question with the purpose because we have very hot debate this morning about the net neutrality and OTT. So now I open the floor for any questions from the audience. I don't know if we have some remote participation. Not yet, maybe later on. Okay, so yes. You just may ask the questions, you can share your opinion, whatever it is. I encourage you to get involved and to contribute to this session. Thank you.
Hi. That people are valuing cost over speed. But in my experience, it's not that surprising either. I mean, the fact is there are many geographic challenges that we need to overcome. But to me, I don't necessarily see, forgive me if this isn't a question, it's more of a comment. I don't really see community networks as being a threat, for instance, to the financial model of many broadband networks, seeing as how community, especially rural communities, are often more poorer anyway, and then they often have less requirements. I mean, we're not necessarily talking about streaming hours of YouTube. It's about, connecting people to weather reports, to local government services, to news, things like that. So I guess the question is more about, why aren't we talking about community networking?
Thank you. It's very important also, as you have already mentioned, for the communities because they are in the possibility to roll out the fiber and later on to make money of these deployments, to sell this fiber to operators. I think that the good case is Sweden. They are just doing very well. It is about the raising of the awareness of the benefits of the broadband network. It is about, and also the networking between all different parties is very important. Okay, yes? Okay, Blagoj, Christoph from Makedonski.
Yes, interesting remark regarding the possibility for the municipalities. I think that the idea was regarding municipality. Actually, there is no such case on the Balkan as far as I am informed. There were some, let's say, ideas from some municipalities to build such network, local networks, and then to cooperate or to rent to the operators, but without success. I think that there is a problem in the law on public-private partnership. This is one issue. Second issue is that municipalities, even though they are financially decentralized from the central government, they are not in good standing financially, and there is no possibility to invest in such network. Maybe they could support the demand side, as maybe Vladimir mentioned. They could, let's say, initiative some e-services for the citizens in order to support motivation of the operators to invest even in the rural areas. For the operators, I think that maybe bigger challenge will be a regional approach on the whole issue, because Europe is considering digital single market, not only in theory but in practice. But here, especially in former Yugoslavia or Western Balkan, as a new definition, there is no possibility to, let's say, to coordinate and to have cross-border activities and to have equal step in the regulation and to cooperate even between the operators. So maybe the operators, the regulators that are present here should consider, let's say, this gathering, this conference as an initial step to start such discussion in order to overcome bottlenecks and to boost the cooperation and to build better network, and then to answer to the question whether we have enough broadband to be answer for need for speed. Thank you.
Now, Ucha Suri would like to add something to this conversation. I just wanted to remind you that I just feel like we are jumping on the other area. It is the bridging the gap. We'll have a discussion about that later on, just to see what is the potential for the rural areas and the municipalities to bridge this gap. Just have this in mind in your further contribution. Okay, go ahead.
Hello everyone. Thank you for the invitation. Just small intervention, and my answer is for Michael's question about it's a very important point for my country. Actually, we have small and medium enterprises in our rural areas, and these guys are working just for salaries. It's some kind of social activity guys, technical guys in small villages, in few villages. And also we have another project, it's supported by the Internet Society, and it's a small enterprises with a fair regulation of access market to get internet in the rural areas without the bottlenecks and with some, I think we don't need support of local municipalities, local governmental guys. We just need a fair regulation of access markets in the rural areas. Thanks.
Just a question, what you have mentioned, because I have seen also in the session last year, which was held in Belgrade, you raised a question about wholesale broadband services in rural area. What does it mean? Does it mean that there are no obligation for the bigger operators there is no operator designated to have significant market power in it to provide the wholesale broadband services in rural area in Georgia, or what?
I'm talking about the points of presence of the big operators, because these small guys are just last mile operaters, to be honest, and they just need to take the internet on the price which is cost accounting, how it explain, because the big telcos trying to create some bottlenecks for these guys because they are existing in the same market. They are vertically integrated and they're trying somehow to create some barriers for the small guys.
We have a question or whatever it is, opinion from Dragan Špujnovski, OneWeb operator.
I'm not surprised that the discussion of Mr. Uršić regarding the sensitiveness of the customers in relation to the speed or to the prices attracted a lot of attention to the public here, as well as I see the comments in the screen there, that the speed maybe should not have been that aggressive as the price targets should have been. I remind very well, during the setting of these targets, it's okay, it's a direction probably, not the mic. It's okay. So I remember very well First, there was a huge discussion among the European Union policymakers and regulatory agencies on one side and ethno on the other side. Now,
The other microphone, just to see if it about the mic or the connection, please.
so first, a huge discussion has been carried out between on the European Union level at that time, and after the adoption of such aggressive 2020 policy on European level, all the EU countries, as well as EU accession countries, were automatically accepting this agenda. Here, we also had huge discussion on these issues. And it is really very obvious that a high-speed broadband is not necessarily needed for the basic purposes of access of the citizens. It was included in the discussion of the Mr. Manolea as well. And I support it very much. Usually the high-speed broadband you need only for, as he mentioned, 3G or games, girls and gambling. Or I would rather say multimedia. Multimedia is subject of comfort, not subject of basic needs of everyone. So it was not surprising that the price sensitiveness was much more important before, and today is also not surprising that the price sensitiveness is the first thing in the customer's interest.
Okay, Vesna, Македонски Телеком.
I just want to, hi everyone, I just want to share my thoughts on the topic. I'm working on the wholesale department, so maybe just to stress another view of the capacities needed and the usage of on the internet, on the subscribers, maybe not from a single consumer point of view, but from the operator and then internet service provider point of view, which are the segment that I'm working in. So what we see this year is that the need for the capacities are exploding. We see doubling and tripling of the capacities on top of the projections that we have for this year. So definitely I disagree that in rural areas people only need to see weather forecast or some basic connection with the municipalities. All over, people have need to be globally connected, to be on social networks. Even the type of content is changing. The videos are going HD. So in order to serve all this capacity and all this data boom, the need for speed is tremendous. So it's not only a matter of infrastructure, the physical infrastructure, but also core infrastructure, the routers needed, and the whole IP core network to support it. My point is to have this ecosystem, to keep this ecosystem alive. There must be some modus of working must be put in balance, because the need for investment are just increasing with exponential speed. So for everything to function, we definitely need to find some modus of working.
Thank you. Before we jump to the second area, I would like just to Bogdan to hear something to add.
Just to add on this. So what we were saying is the fact that right now, if you're going in the rural areas and you ask the regular people if they need access to internet, the major part of them would say, no, I don't need to access the internet. So it's not even a matter of price. So what needs to be done, if we need to think in that direction, is also first to develop the services for those citizens in order for them to ask for it. And actually, right now, we don't have it. Speaking from one of my previous engagements 10 years ago, when we went into rural areas and tried to get them with a telecenter, so one point of access, we found out that the people in the villages use the internet mainly for one thing. Do you know what would be in the rural areas? No? No? Not weather forecast? They think games? No? Sorry? No, not Facebook. It was multimedia. It was talking with their loved ones who went working abroad. That was the #1 usage. And they wanted video. Yes, it's true. They wanted video because they wanted to see their grandson who is now in Spain or in Italy or whatever. So that was the need. But if you ask them, do you need to use the internet? I said, no. Who is this internet guy? I never heard about it. If you will ask him, do you want to see your relatives that live 1,000 kilometers away and you see them maybe twice a year? Yeah, they would say, yeah, maybe I need that. I will even pay 10 euros or 15 euros up to it. So it's both of supply and demand. So it's also how do you ask them, what kind of information do you get from them, and how do you help them to bridge this?
Yes, I totally agree that digital literacy and getting people to know about the opportunities of this global network is very important to raise the interest, because I was very it was very interesting information that the main reason for the people who never connect to internet is that they feel that there is no need. Having known what all the opportunities are offered over the internet, it's very strange to hear that there is no need to access the internet. That's why it is very important about the digital literacy, about the opportunity, just to get to know to people what are the opportunities offered over the internet. If I may jump on the another area, it is the cost reduction. I just would like to give a brief overview. In 2014, European Commission adopted the directive for reduction the cost of deployment of next generation access networks. There are different measures about the reduction the cost, access to operators networks, not just from the telecom but from the other operators like the toplification, sewage, electricity, coordination of the civil work. Also new buildings that are going to be built to be equipped with the opportunity for connecting to households of these buildings with those networks is also very important. It is because 80% of the cost for deploying of new network is associated to civil engineering work. And also about the impact assessment, which is accompanying document to this directive. European Commission somehow have estimated, based on their experience, that putting all these measures together that I have mentioned previously will reduce the cost for deployment, OPEX capital cost, for about 20-30%. The cost will be reduced. So I would like to ask Ucha just to share your experience about your country, what have been done so far about the reduction of the cost, what measures have been implemented in Georgia about the reduction of the cost for deployment of those networks.
Okay, thank you again. It's my pleasure to be here and participate in this event. About the answer, yes, Georgia have some duties and agreement with the European Union and amendments in the legislation regards of the infrastructure sharing, reducing some costs for building the new broadband networks is existing, but it's not a law. We have a draft for at least 1 year, but without any results. But it's a little bit difficult to explain to know telco infrastructure guys how it will be working in the future. I mean, access, sharing the infrastructure, and so on. But we have very good 2 projects. It's related with governmental initiatives. One is this OpenNet. It's how it's explained. A private investor give 150 million US dollars for infrastructure to build fiber optic infrastructure and connecting the rural area points to the public network. And it's have to cover all settlements with up to 200 end users, and also will be operated by private company. And also we have, and it's this information also related with the previous discussion, how to encourage end users to clear understanding, because access to the internet is it's not just service, it's a very important service for the future, for development of these guys, and it's related with the United Nations Millennium Goals. That's why our government launched also another project is related with e-commerce. They're creating opportunity up to 400 local million dollars. It's up to 18 million US dollars. Trainings for e-commerce and also the vouchers for these guys who will be involved in this project. It's around 100 US dollars totally, but this is for terminals for end users and also for internet monthly fees. So very briefly about Georgia, and I'll be happy to answer all the questions.
Thank you. Also, we have here Primoz from ACOS from Slovenia. I know that they have a very good system for broadband mapping. Our agency, also our guys, have been over there before we have implemented our system, just to share, to see what have they done on this field. And that's why I would like to ask him to share your opinion and your experience about the broadband mapping system and sharing of information on one portal for other network infrastructures, because there are two different systems as far as I know. One is sharing information for the networks from the other, and another one is broadband mapping. Broadband mapping is more about the end customers, just to see what are the options for the end customers, for the end subscriber, to see on which operator he or her may connect and at what speed.
Thank you. So the information that I gave before in the first part, most of them were obtained by our broadband mapping, and I'm happy to hear today from our Albanian colleague that their system is also going well with the changes, and also have been some questions from the Macedonian, I believe, in this context. Well, we go from the premise that information is the key, and even though this is old phrase and so on, it goes for both end user and, in this case, operators. So the system that has been conceived in Slovenia, and we like to believe that it's one of the better ones in Europe, has merged several different databases into one. So we have a bunch of public databases like cadastre of infrastructures to register of buildings to business register, and on the other side we have non-public ones, like for example network termination points, which ACOS obtained himself through operators. And we also have mapping from wholesale and retail, which includes pricing, which includes technologies. And all this is trying to be merged into one system with different levels of access for different users. Hopefully we will get to the point where we will have it open as much as possible. The information is being based in a way that it goes to the house exact. On top of that, we have decided to do an extra part, which is public utilities. We think this is a huge potential, and we are adding as much as possible of other public infrastructure in this, may it be electro distribution, may it be sewer system, everything that may help in this case, above all operators, how to lower their costs. ducts, empty ducts, for example, which in property of electro companies or something can be a huge potential for lowering the costs. That's one of the new parts, and the second new part is to actually add into this geo-information system also the planning of the future building works. One of the solutions that Slovenia had even before the cost reduction directive came out was exactly this one. We had a system of notification of planning of future infrastructure buildings. That was going for both electronic communications and utilities. So as the system goes at this moment is that we get practically all possible infrastructure investments notified to the agency, and we publish them. Together with that time, we also require from them to issue out some sort of a call out to come and co-invest. So in this case, if we have someone that is interested in co-investing, which means operators, the original investor has to comply, has to try to work in a way, or plan at least, that this co-investment will be possible. And if we're talking about public money, if there's public funding in the background, in that case, they are even obliged to add duct system that is capable of handling possible electronic infrastructure. So all of this we are trying to include into our mapping system. Hopefully we will have, in this part too, we will have visible for public and especially operators actual mapping of how this plant works will be, where on the territory will be, and if they're able to combine this with existing capabilities, this can mean a huge incentive for them to get their costs down. So this is one of the cases that I think can be used in other countries as well. As far as we know, some of the countries are using similar, and I'm strongly suggesting to look into it. So, thank you.
Thank you. When it comes about the directive for cost reduction for deployment of next generation access networks, for example, in Macedonian market, I believe that more or less this directive have been transposed into the law for electronic communication and other secondary bylaws. Also, this single information point which you were talking about was also up and running since 2015. So the data from the cadastre system via web services are published on this single information point. Also about the coordination of the civil work, any operator who is network operator who is interested to build a network in certain area has the obligation 6 months before starting with the actual ground job to publish the information and to notify the agency about their intentions. So there is a possibility for coordination of with other operators about the civil engineering work. But although it has been transposed and the single information point is up and running, somehow I don't know. I feel that there is something we could do better here in Macedonia. So Vladimir, I would like to hear your opinion. What is missing? Why it is about the quantity of the data? It is about the quality, accuracy of the data that is provided, because it is something very important to have reliable data on this system. It seems that the operators are not believing in the accuracy of the data in this system. What is that we may do better here in Macedonia?
First of all, it is a good thing because the regulation is transposed in the law and even in the bylaws. Single information point is created, but to be honest, I think that the job is not yet finished. That's you have correct opinion that we are not using as we should be using as operators, of course. I think that this is not only one reason for that. One reason is because we feel that there's a lack of informations. We cannot clearly see accuracy of the information. We know that the layers of the single information points are gathered from the state cadastre, but we don't have enough infrastructure information into this system. That's only one thing. The other thing is, for us it was a good idea when we were submitting our data to the agency previously, and I think that the new changes in the bylaw, they are in good way, because still now we have the same obligation, but we think that maybe we need to have more proactive approach from the regulatory authority regarding the collection of the data, regarding the publication and verification of the data. Of course, the other thing what I think it has to be done is your promotion of this already up and running system, and not all of the operators are well informed about the existence of this single information point, and that is one reason why it doesn't contain enough data to be largely used. So we are expecting more promotion from the regulatory side regarding this.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions, any contribution from the audience here regarding this cost reduction measures for deployment of next generation access networks? Maybe from remote? Yeah, Primos, please. Sorry?
Question about the liabilities of the big telcos. Do they are responsible to introduce their information about their plans, future developments for 3 years or not? Responsibilities of...
Macedonia? Only 6 months ahead, not 3 years ahead. About the planned civil work, if you are asking. They have only 6 months prior to civil, before the commencement of the civil work. They need to notify the agency about this. Okay. Another thing I would like to get back again, because I told you we'll talk about that later. We have about 15 minutes more about the digital gap between urban and rural. I just would like to start with one study that was commissioned by the Agency for Electronic Communication, and it was carried out by the Analysis Mason. And the result about this study, among the other results, I just want to focus on one result, is about the commercial interest for deployment of the next generation access network here in Macedonia. So according to this study, it was calculated that the commercial interest for fiber to the home networks, commercially viable deployment, would be only 44%. That means that on 9 years return of investment, net present value of the investment would be 0 or positive. Going further, more than 44% of the deployment, net present value of the investment for interval of 9 years, 9 years return on investment, net present value would be negative. That means that there is no interest for rural areas. There will be a lot of white spots and the people, and we are not talking about basic broadband, we are talking about fast broadband networks. So I would like to just to open a discussion, what are the options, because here in the Southeast Europe, Macedonia, Serbia, Montenegro, Albania, does not have access to the structural funds of the European Union, like for example Slovenia has, or Romania. So I would like to open just a discussion Besides, as you have mentioned previously, for the municipalities to be involved in the deployment of these networks, what are the other possible solutions to bridge this gap? Can someone share your opinion, your thoughts about this?
If I
Yes.
can.
Go ahead.
Yes, you're right. We witnessed the results of that study, but to be honest, it was the result of 44% without any additional measure from the regulatory authority and from the government. And with the regulatory measures, we saw that that viability, the percentage is increasing. So one thing is to, of course, to have additional regulatory measures towards the comfortable
To include those
investment,
measures, yes.
to improve the investment environment in the country. The other thing is access to the funds, of course. In some places, mainly rural areas, operators will need access to the additional funds, whether they are provided from the countries, whether from the governments, or maybe from other funds. For example, you mentioned EU structural funds. Of course, we as a country, or I can say we as a countries, don't have access to that kind of funds, at least not directly. But we think that there's another possibilities regarding that manner. One example is West Balkan Initiative. For example, the Berlin process has some idea of bringing some funds to the West Balkan 6+ countries, to the some infrastructure funds which can be used from the countries in this region. But we think that if in order to put in use that kind of funds, we need a regional approach, not just country by country approach, and not just from side of the governments, but of course from side of the operators. We think the cooperation between different operators, mainly in this, at least West Balkan area, we have several bigger operators. We are one of them, Makedonski Telekom, of course Deutsche Telekom is the other, Telenor is the third one. Maybe we think that cooperation between operators present in the West Balkan and cooperation together with the governmental institutions, national regulatory authorities, policymakers, ministries and other which can be involved, it can be very productive. It can open the new fund streams to this manner.
Thank you. Yes, there was. I've just before a few weeks we had a meeting about that regional initiative. It was a study carried out by the World Bank about the regional need for interconnection between different countries and using the electricity network in order to achieve this goal. Yes, okay, Dragan would like to...
Slightly simplify what Vladimir very well said. Building infrastructure, whatever kind of infrastructure, in rural areas or in areas where there is no commercial interest for that, is subject, first of all, of incentive. First of all, somebody who need that has to give some incentive for such kind of infrastructure. If the state want to have equal development of the rural and urban areas, or to decrease the digital gap between those areas, then let's start off itself. Let's invest in that. Okay, if there is no enough funds for investment, there are available funds on the European level, there are other available funds for that kind of gap, but first of all, they have to start making incentives for the entities who can do that. Because the market is competitive, because the market is liberalized, it is of course the operators, but the operators itself would not invest in such infrastructure if they can not return back those investments. It is very, very simple.
Thank you. We have a question over there.
I'm confused about the statements about the demand for internet in rural areas, if there is one or not. I understand that they don't call it the internet, but they actively use it to, especially in multimedia ways, to speak to their loved ones, or as far as I know, in Africa they use Facebook and they won't call it internet, but they're actually active on it. So does it really matter if they call it internet or not, because they are actively using it, so there is a demand. So which one is true? Is there no demand in rural areas, or there is, but it's not just called internet and it's called Skype, Facebook, whatever?
Okay. Just to reaffirm that the initiative that Vladimir mentioned is digital transformation of Western Balkan. This is the initiative of the group of operators active on this in this geographical and economic definition Western Balkan +2, supporting by the relevant chambers, supporting by Regional Cooperation Council, and already starting with some study done by the academia. The idea is to bring together on the same table business community, policymakers, operators, and consumers also, NGO, including NGO, in order to agree upon common goals, or let's say some targets for this region, in order to come a bit closer to the European average. So we need support, we need open discussion, we need to set the goals, and then to have, let's say, common understanding and common approach toward the European institution, toward the financial institution, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, Investment Bank, World Bank, etc., in order to support this region to increase GDP in some period of 5 to 10 years, and to become closer to the European average. And also we need common understanding and shaping a regulatory environment in order to support such initiative. So the idea is to sit together, and there are several studies. It's not only the initiative Digital Transformation of Western Balkan, but there is another initiative or study done by the World Bank, but this is related to the energy sector, renewable energy sector, and also communication interfaces, etc. And there is third study done by PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, for the European Investment Bank, and they are also looking for opportunities, because the financial institutions are looking where to invest. So therefore they identify our sector as one that is interesting for them. So therefore we, as a relevant stakeholders, we should support this and support their ideas. Thank you.
Yes, over there.
About one question about for the operators. Is there any, talking about investment and return of investment, is there any rural place in Macedonia or Slovenia without internet coverage? And the second thing is about the speed. I would say that the need for speed is driven by the services that are provided by the companies.
If you want to.
Yeah, if you allow me, I will make a little wider explanation or a little story to most of the stuff that was asked from Macedonia.
Just a second, if possible. Can we wrap up this discussion in the next 3 minutes, so we have enough time for final remarks and conclusion?
I'll take 2.5.
Yes?
Yeah, okay. So
I start to measure.
Just for the first question, from Slovene side, we are talking, when we said the will for internet or the will for speed, we are talking people. I want a good 20, I have a good 20 megabit connection, not no connection at all. I also want to reply to the lady in the back from before. Concerning the rest of the stuff, when you were talking about investment or possibilities outside of the European funds, we had a situation where the government was aware that this might be a problem, that we will have white spots. And we just finished our commercial interest survey. We even had some sort of a inter-ministry working group about this. But as the survey was done, they discovered that the commercial interest was so high that we don't need in working group. What happened? Apparently, this is the story part now that comes in. We have a pure infrastructure operator who decided to compete on the funds from the European Investment Bank in this case. And he didn't go for the, let's say, Juncker's fund, which is not available, I think, to you. They are just covering him, and he succeeded. So he will be, as we expect, he will be covering a quite large rural, solely rural area. The whole system, as I understand from start, was going to cover part of Italy, part of Croatia, and part of Slovenia. But we know for sure that he managed to get through with this plan of his and succeeded to get funds from EIB, and will be starting his. So I think there are ways. You just need to have a little vision to it, how to perform this part. So 215.
Anyone else? If we do not have any more questions, or I would like to ask for key messages from this session, so we may need also to endorse them, to support them, please.
One, two, three, four, five. Yes. Okay, so we've down the discussion into 3 key messages. You can add some more. I mean, the discussion was broader, but we think it.
It's coming to you. Start.
Okay, so as I said before, the discussion was broader, but we think we've narrowed down into 3 key messages. The first one is competition is important, but the government must create suitable market conditions for the development of access speeds and online services. The second one is that access speeds need to be defined clearly. There was that piece about maximum, average, and minimum speed. And the third one is services create demand for access and need to be promoted via, telecoms and service providers. If there's any key message we left out. Okay.
Consensus.
Okay.
So I just want to thanks to all of you, also to key participants, and I have just a small information to share with you. At 7:30 there will be buses waiting in front of this hotel. So all of you who are in another hotel in Bellevue, just come here, because the buses will wait here at 7:30 and will take us to the Biljanini Izvori. It is the restaurant, Biljana's Spring, where we'll have a nice dinner. Thank you very much.
And 2 more housekeeping announcements. Thank you, Sinisha, for the session. In the program, you might have seen there is a discussion on a civic association. Whoever wants to join us for that discussion, we will meet in the room next door. And for the CDIG fellows and youth who are having reimbursement of their travel costs, we meet there also at 6:30. So please be there on time. Thanks. And thank you for a good first day.